Hello, everyone. This is Gail Miller from Lantronix. We'll be getting started in about 1 minute. This is going to be a big webinar, lots of attendees coming on board. So let's give them another minute and then we'll get started. But welcome. Okay, we're at the top of the hour, so let's get started as a few more people register in. Again, I want to welcome you all to the Lantronix Out-of-Band Management webinar. Our topic is reducing total cost of ownership with advanced out-of-band solutions. Before we get started and I introduce the presenter, I first want to go over a couple of things that will occur during this webinar. The time will be about 45 minutes with questions at the end. If you'd like to ask a question, since all attendees are on mute, please use the question tab on your tab bar and note your question, and we'll get to it at the end of the webinar. We're also going to be recording this session as well, and then after the webinar, we will be sending along both the presentation and a copy of the webinar as well for future reference, or if you'd like to share it with colleagues who aren't able to attend today. Last but not least, even though we want you to ask all the questions you need to ask, we're going to ask you some questions along the way in the presentation in the form of polls asking your opinion. So be ready to answer some very good poll questions because we want to hear and get your thoughts and ideas. Next slide. So now let's get to the presentation. Your presenter is Eric Weiss. He's been with Lantronix since 2002. He comes from beautiful Austin, Texas, and is our out-of-band product line manager. Prior to that, 16 years with a former competitor, Uplogix, which was acquired by Lantronix, in various important roles from Director of Technical Services to Vice President of Customer Success and Sales. He's had a couple of stops in both Trilogy Software and Bluefish, and he comes to us with a PhD in high energy physics. Let us welcome this excellent speaker and out-of-band management expert. They're all yours, Eric.
Thank you, Gail. I hope I can live up to Gail's introduction there. I'm going to try. I get kind of excited. I actually stood up because there are so many of you online, and I find it easier to talk to people when I'm standing. Hopefully my camera will track me. I really want to thank you all for coming and hearing about the Lantronix out-of-band portfolio. Tonight, we're really going to be talking about advanced out-of-band. But before we jump into it, it probably is good just to go through the basics of what is out-of-band, what is in-band management. When we're talking about network equipment in general, and we're talking about in-band management, what we really mean is somewhere in your NOC, you'll run a lot of tools, you know, whether it's SolarWinds, eHealth, Spectrum, to manage the network. To manage your network, you'll send SNMP queries over the network. You'll see how all the devices are doing, and that's great. And that is network management. It gives you a great picture of how everything's performing at any instance, how everything is related to each other. The drawbacks with in-band management is it's reliant upon the network that it's actually managing to do the management. So that's where you kind of come up with what we, classic out-of-band management. And that's where you take a console server. Lantronix makes a lot of these. We have the EMG, we have the SLC. We also now have the advanced out-of-band products, the LMs that we're going to talk about. The out-of-band management is when you plug directly into the console port for a secondary direct connection into your devices. This is good for if you're upgrading configurations, if you're doing maintenance, bringing up data centers, and it becomes very important if something happens and you actually have a need for out-of-band besides maintenance, besides spin up, something happens and your network goes down. Most modern out-of-band management today, at this point, your in-band management has gone blind, and most modern out-of-band management has some form of secondary connection, whether that's an old school dial-up modem, whether it's that you can call into, whether it might be a secondary Ethernet link, or it may even be a cellular connection, which is becoming more and more popular. And that will give, the network administrator the ability to have basically longer arms and to reach into their Lantronix out-of-band device and touch, their routers, their switches, their WAN accelerators, whatever they have out in their network. They can start to debug, see what the problem is, and try and fix it, bring it back up. This is pretty classic out-of-band management. Lantronix has been a leader as far as quality of software and security for a number of years now. When the network administrator is done, network comes back online, and you can tear down that secondary connection. And the great thing is you reduce truck rolls, you gave the administrator longer arms. And that's just, sort of the basics of standard out-of-band. Before I jump into what is advanced out-of-band, I see that we have a question popped up, Gail.
Yeah, we're starting early with questions. Let me launch the first poll. And are you using cellular as a secondary connection today? Real easy, answer yes, no, or presently you're just thinking about it. Please don't worry, your answers are private, but we'd love to know what you got going on. Okay, we got about 10, 12% of the participants. There we go. Getting a few more. We're going to give it another 30 seconds. Okay, we're going to be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1, and let me show the results. Well, here are some interesting results. 48% of you said yes, 27% said no, and another 24% said you're thinking about it. Back to you, Eric.
Great. So thank you all very much. The reason that I ask these questions is, I like to understand where people are moving. That's generally what I'm seeing is the world is moving to cellular. There are some problems with doing cellular for out-of-band that I'm sure a lot of you have struggled with. How do you get that connection back into your network or your customer's network? What are the security policies? This is one thing that's very different about Lantronix from almost every other out-of-band vendor, or actually every other out-of-band vendor that I've ever seen, is that we want to help you with this stuff. We want to help you design that solution. And we have a lot of different options on how you can connect. And we recently, not only do we, for cellular, you can connect through a VPN tunnel that you set up your VPN, or you can get a provider to give you a private APN. So just when they come on, you're already on a private network. that's just for you. We also have some products that will build reverse SSH tunnels, which give you like the equivalent of a DM VPN. But the most exciting thing too is especially in this world of having offices in a bunch of different countries all over the place, it can be really tough to get SIM cards and SIM card provisioning done. And at Lantronix, we actually have the ability to have turnkey cellular solutions for you. So it's a one-stop shop, so you can actually get your SIM cards from us as well. And if you want to set up a private VPN, we can do that for you too. So we're really trying to make it easier. All of our FAEs and our regional sales managers are really good with this stuff and would love to consult with you on it. Before jumping into what advanced out-of-band is, since I just talked to you about regular out-of-band, or what I like to call classic out-of-band, I want to point out the products that we have for this. We currently have, the SLC, which many of you are probably familiar with, which is 8 to 48 serial ports. You can get them in serial, and you can get USB connections. We recently just introduced Ethernet. We have dual DC and AC power. We have some dial-up modems in there. And we also have the EMG, which is a slightly smaller form factor for more of your branch locations or your remotes or your IDFs, 4 to 8 ports. What's neat about the EMGs is not only their small form factor, you can get them with cellular and with Wi-Fi connectivity. We have a central management system called Council Flow, which gives you sort of a one-stop shop window to reach all your equipment from, that is cloud-based. And one of the things about standard out-of-band management is they used to call it out-of-band management. I like to think of it more as out-of-band access. Everything that I talked to you was about how do you, from one remote location, even when the network is down, be able to stick your arms out and touch the equipment on the other side to help bring it up, provision it, and all that. That's great, but it still takes bright people, network administrators. If you kind of move up the levels of device management, you start getting to this thing, these levels of like software-defined net automation, where maybe some of the tasks that you were doing manually, you can automate or you can schedule to do over time. And even better, can you do some embedded intelligence, some of that network monitoring that you used to do using your SNMP queries. And this is where our new line of local managers or LMs comes in. And they have a small form factor as well in the LM80 from 8 serial ports, and we have the LM83X that goes up to 108. And it has its own central management system. What's a little bit different about these devices is they're focused more on how do you manage and use their control center to manage your routers, your switches, your servers, your wireless access points on the other side, and report on them, just more so than just reporting on the equipment. To give you an example of what advanced out-of-band management looks like, oops, one more question. They're coming up too fast for me, Gail.
No problem. I'm here for you. Let's do the next question. Okay. What do you want from an out-of-band management system? 4 options here. You want access to remote devices over an alternative pathway, network monitoring, network automation, or all of the above. Go ahead and vote. Oh, people are thinking about this one, Eric. Oh, there they go. Here come the votes. Okay, we got about 50% of the attendees have voted, so keep coming. Okay, gonna give it another 10 seconds. Okay, and we're closing the poll. All right, let's look and see what the poll tells us. Interesting numbers. Look at this, Eric. Access to remote devices, 16%. Both monitoring and automation of the network were only 3%. And big winner on this one, 79%, all of the above.
Well, great. My question actually should have probably been, have you ever actually seen all of the above in a single product? And that's what I'm going to show you here. And I've spent a lot of my life working on this and am really proud of this particular product. But so for the Lantronix LM series appliances, here, they plug in exactly the same way as, previous out-of-band devices. They sit on the network path, maybe that they're managing. They plug directly into the equipment they're talking to. They also, though, a lot of times are deployed with switched power distribution units, so you can remotely power cycle things. Everything we manage via the serial port. And we supply all the same functionalities that you get with that device access in the past. But what makes us different is we're patented. We hold the patent on being deployed with a functional user ID that can automatically, got too far ahead of myself. So up to that point, what I described to you was a basic console server or terminal server. But what we do is we take those network management tools that you're running in the NOC, and we've actually moved them down onto the device itself. And what we do is we give the device a functional user ID. And by giving it a functional user ID, whether it's a TACX ID, a Radius, ICE, Duo, whatever your customers or yourself are using for your sort of multi-factor authentication, we give a functional one to the Lantronix boxes, and they will automatically log into the devices. And the very first thing over the console port, and the very first thing that they're going to do is make sure that they can talk to them. Once they can say, hey, tell me who you are, let me get your host name, let me get, give me your IP address, what do I know about you, what version of software are you running? It takes that information and it writes it to a database that it stores on the local manager itself. Once it writes it onto that database, it automatically comes up on that web GUI as this is the name of the router at this IP address that we plugged in without you having to do any configuration. The next thing it does is it says, let me see if I can find your startup config. If it can, it copies it down and it basically sets up a file system, a directory for each device it's managing. And it will store its startup config, its running config. It will also store a version of its OS. It basically takes, and a VLAN.dat file if it can find one. It takes a digital copy of the equipment that it's managing and it stores it locally. Once it does that, it begins to query the device. And it will query the device every 30 seconds. And it won't be like an SNMP query. It's coming over the console port. So it's not, it's a very low level. It's the equivalent of if you had a network admin plugged directly into the device and typing all day long, show interface gig E0 or whatever it is you want to look at. Look at your CPU, look at your memory. It will record that every 30 seconds. And then we have a rules engine on here, and it will look at the outcome of all the data it collects from there. And it says, hey, if something is over a threshold, if it's above a certain point, I will take an action. That action could be as simple as alarm. It could be as complicated as maybe it needs to cycle an interface, or maybe it needs to clear a service module or something. It can take actions on those devices. We ship with a lot of out-of-the-box automated routines for various makes and models. We also have the ability for if we don't have what we call that advanced driver that speaks Cisco or Juniper or or F5, or if you have customers in the satellite world that can talk to their Iridium modems or their stabilized antennas out on ships, we have the ability to put, for you or your customers to define, this is how I log into a device, this is how I log out, this is my prompt. And you can actually set up your own queries, commands, and automation. And you can define your own rule set. We also have a great level support team. And for customers who decide to subscribe to our level support, not only do we help you design your deployment to meet all your security needs, but we're constantly there. So if someone calls and says, hi, I have all my help centers are located in Singapore and Australia, but we route all of our calls through 2 data centers in the United States. We have 2 pipes going across the ocean. Can you monitor the traffic and see if one of them's bad so our voice quality is good? And if you see one going bad and the other is up, we'll shut it down. You can use this to do that kind of network automation. The nice thing about it is it's happening right here in the rack, on site, and we're looking at everything from the point of view or through those routers, those switches, those firewalls. If something happens and the network goes down, it's okay, because we can see that the network went down. And maybe something happened, there was a power glitch and all of a sudden this, the whole site went down, it came back up and this router rebooted and it didn't have its configuration, so it doesn't have an IP address anymore. Well, we'll start querying it and we'll see, hey, this is now unconfigured. Say, hey, that's not a big problem because we stored a copy of your configuration. And since we stored a copy of it, we can replace it. At the same time, our device is always trying to reach the outside network. And so you can set up 3 or 4 places that, it's trying to touch home to. And if it doesn't get a response from them, it will automatically spin up its out-of-band connection. Our out-of-band connections are modular on these devices, so you can slide them in as cards. They can be V92 modems, regular phone lines. They can be cellular, LTE, 5G. They can be for places that don't have LTE and have to drop to lower. We have modems that can do, that'll go from LTE down to HPSA plus, down to GPRS, GSM, to find whatever networks that's needed. We also build low Earth orbit satellites. So if you're working with companies that have oil rigs or comms on the move, we can make use of the LEO satellite, the Iridium satellite network, which covers, the entire planet. And so you can be moving and use it. There's a lot of different options. And as soon as we phone back home and give ourselves a connection, and the reason that we keep the connection down before then is for security reasons. You have the option to keep it up all the time, but why not? Why do that? How about bring it up when you need it? And so once we do that, we can start pushing data back to backfill the central management system. And we can say exactly, hey, we're seeing a problem on the router, it's lost its configuration. We're in the process of pushing a new configuration. When the configuration, if it comes back up, that's great. If a network operations person wants to come and say, hey, I want to take over the automation, they can always log in because people take precedence. We will wait until the network has come back up and everyone has logged out before we tear that out of band connection back down. What's really nice about having some of this automation, if you think about things like, maybe I have a switch that goes bad, and you need to drop ship one to the new location, and you don't have a network administrator there. Not a problem. You can just unplug the old switch, plug the new switch in, make all the connections. We'll query it. We'll realize, hey, we can't log into this. Our username and password isn't working. We'll default to whatever the defaults were for the make manufacturer that was plugged in there before. Once we get plugged in there again, we'll see it's not configured. We can push the configuration back down onto that device. You can imagine, if something happens and a configuration file gets corrupt, we have the automatic power controller here that we manage also through its serial connection. And so, maybe you're having a session and your WAN controller or something, WAN accelerator feels like it's off and you just want to power cycle it. From your console session, you can issue a power cycle command while watching the screen. And you'll watch it go down and come back up as if you were plugged into it and standing right in front of it inside a data center, a wiring closet, and plugged in through your laptop. So what we're really working on is trying to give you longer arms, better tools in your hands. As I said, the two devices we sell are the LM83X local manager, which is our larger box for data centers, and our LM80. We have our control center. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what these guys do. I want to point out that we will be sending a link, or in here if we post this webinar, we have, I don't know if that popped up on your screen. I think it didn't actually. But here, let's see if I can pull it down over onto here. I encourage you to look at our full product briefs. You can see our feeds and speeds. All that stuff is available on the Lantronix website. To get a little bit more into what these devices actually have in them, because I know that a lot of the people on the call come from distribution, from resellers, and you guys do care about speeds and feeds. They come with, on the small side, we have the LM80. It has no moving parts in it. It has a fixed 8 console ports. It also has a USB-A, a USB-C. It has its own console port or serial port. It comes with 3 Ethernet ports, 2 copper, 1 SFP cage. So you can, put them just about anywhere. And then if you look at the modem, I'm showing a cellular modem here. It actually screws in and screws out. And one of the areas where we really excel in is, as I said earlier, is understanding cellular modems. So, sometimes people want to have high speeds coming through all their cellular stuff. Sometimes they're in a very low bandwidth area. So we have, Cat M1s, which are more machine to machine, that have a longer wavelength, and having the longer wavelength, they can be deeper penetrating. So if you want to go into places like, buildings or data centers that have very poor reception, we have an option. What's really nice is you don't always have to, since they're not built into the box and they're cards that slide in and slide out, if you get the wrong modem, you can always swap it out and return it for another one. It has cooling fins on the back. The LM83X, if you look at the left side of it, it looks exactly like the right side, like the LM80. And that's because anything the LM80 can do, the LM83 does. The difference is it has 3 expansion bays that you can put cards into. You could put, these 8-port serial cards. So if I took the 8 base ports plus 8 and another 8 in the third bay here, it would give you 32 ports. We also build these dedicated Ethernet cards that allow you to make a dedicated direct Ethernet connection if you want to connect to the management port or AUX port of a device in your data center. It also lets you plug into the service processor ports of your servers to do KVM over IP. And this is really nice, like in some places, a lot of people like to have things like Palo Alto firewalls where they don't know how to use the CLI, which you get over console, but they're very comfortable with the web interface. You can plug your out-of-band LM83X directly into the Ethernet port of a Palo Alto firewall. And even if the network is down because the firewall is the thing that's causing it to be down, because we're going to come up on this out-of-band cellular connection, you can still stream the GUI of the firewall, even if you don't have access to it through standard means, which is really neat. And it's very cool. And so we have that. We also have this optional LCD modem that you can choose. If you like to be able to have people configure, like the old school printers using the LCD modem, they can use that. Or if you really want to go for port density, you can put more cards in there. And we build another 2 cards that are 16 to 32 serial ports that use these fan out cables or these VHDI cables. And so if you were to put a 32 port card in these, you could get actually 32, 64, 96 plus the base 8. And that's how you get up to 104 ports in a rack, in one rack U. Other things about these units, we have a very granular authorization policy. So you can define, or your users can define exactly who gets access to what. So no matter what your segregation of duties in your company is, if your firewall people can only see firewalls, but you want your auditors maybe to be able to see the logs of everything people do. That is what you get when you use these, when you use local managers. You can set it up for that. The common features that they all have, that they both have are, they have the same software, same processor. They do have an onboard solid state SSD disk that's encrypted. Field installable modem slot. We also send these through through FIPS certification, which is something that you need, to be in US government facilities. And so we're always taking security very, very seriously. That's sort of why we have a rules engine that allows you to run rules opposed to scripts on our devices. We're very, very focused on keeping things as secure as possible. The control center basically lets you, as a way that you can see your entire deployment from a single pane of glass. It lets you see all your devices and all the devices connected to them. So for instance, if you have a router plugged in port 11, it'll tell you the type of router, it'll give you its host name, it'll tell you it's connected. You can use this for automatic provisioning, not only of the control center for automatic provisioning of the local managers, the Lantronix local managers, but so you can push things down like OS updates, configuration files, ACL changes in mass to devices from the control center by just uploading them from your laptop, assuming that you have the permission to do everything. So that lets you do mass changes. You can also schedule those things to happen at some point in the future. So if you can only do changes at 2 or 3 in the morning. We also validate your configs and your operating systems, and we back them up. So I talked to you about how we made the snapshot originally. What I forgot to tell you is that we'll go in every couple hours and we'll check the configuration file. And we'll say, did this configuration file change? And if it did, we will compare it to the previous one. And if it's different, that becomes your new running config, and your previous becomes your previous. And we'll keep up to 20 copies as for backups, which is really nice because then you can go in, since we're storing all that data, you can do things like report on change logs, like say, hey, I want to see all the changes made on all the routers or all the firewalls or all the switches in my environment, or maybe just one facility in the past hour or yesterday or in the past month. And we'll tell you not only what those changes were, but who made them and what IP address they came in from making them. Anything you do on our devices will get recorded. So anything rendered to the screen, the full sessions, we'll have a copy of. And going back to what I'm saying, what I was saying is we take security very seriously. The other thing that we do is we have some service level verification tests. And what these are is, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a second, is a way to generate synthetic traffic. So not only can you use us, I talked to you about being plugged into the devices and doing show commands and all the stuff that you would do normally, give you that layer 2 data, but we also can get some of the layer 3 data by seeing how well, the response times and things are. And then we have a terminal applet built in, so you can click on any device, any router, any switch, any server, or just at the whole and start a CLI session to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, how we use this to increase network resiliency. So if you think about the anatomy of sort of a network issue, of a problem, at time zero, something happens, right? And then you go through this series of steps, where nobody knows something happened. Eventually you get alerted, you find out it was unknown. Once you do that, you try and notify, like, who did this? Where is this? Where is the problem coming from? Can I isolate it? Once I isolate and say, okay, this is where it's coming from, this is what it's due to, I resolve it. Now, how long it takes depends on a bunch of different things. If you're running standard network tools and you're using SNMP queries, you're probably pinging your network every 3 to 5 minutes. Most people don't respond to a single bad query. They wait for 2 or 3 or so. So it could be anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes before you actually know that you got a problem. Once you do that, you go through all those steps, and it really depends on what kind of access you have. Can you see what's going on? Do you need to call someone? Do you have to have a service call? And then, where is the device located compared to you? It could typically be, anywhere from a couple hours to actually, if it's, a substation and it's late in the day and you have to, get someone to drive out there and it's a 4-hour drive, it could take, maybe days. You may not be able to schedule someone to get out there until tomorrow. So it really depends on how you get it through, and the worst is we do a lot of business out on oil rigs and things at sea, and if you have to fly someone out to an oil rig to power cycle a device, that's really a shame, and kind of expensive. So if you think about what this looks like with Lantronix, we're no different than anyone else. Something happens and boom, we see the event. Where we do become different is when we start polling it. We see in the first 30 seconds that you have a problem. Maybe we saw loss of frame drop on the primary interface of a router or something. We see that happen. We may not react to the first thing. We might wait, 2 or 3 polls. At that point, we're about 1.5 minutes into your problem, and we've isolated it. And we say, okay, loss of frame. I'm going to take my next action. Let me try and, I don't know, clear the service processor or something. If that works, great, we've resolved it. 30 seconds later, we go and we say, hey, everything's great. That isn't, we can take the next step in your run book. That might be cycle that interface. If that fixed it, great, we go back in, it looks good, we go back in again, another 30 seconds later, we're about 3 minutes into your outage, and we might have fixed it before your network management tools even saw that it was an issue. Now, we can't fix every problem. We do basic stuff we can automate. We can see, we can push files, push configurations, push OSs, pull them off of devices, up and down interfaces, clear counters, clear service modules, that sort of basic stuff, and chain those together to make runbooks. But even if we don't fix it, and especially if you have the kind of problems like, you're deploying a new set of switches or a new router, and you keep having problems with it, and you're calling into the manufacturer and they're like, well, did you have a snapshot of when it happened? Or do you have like the show tech or the log files or whatever it is they need to debug it? We have the ability to go through the first couple steps of whatever you need done. And by the time that a human being would have to come onto there, they would know we would have collected all that data and we would have it there for them. And we could have pulled the tech file, the log file. We could have actually, even if we got up on a cellular connection, sent it off to the manufacturer and said, hey, here, I got this problem again. And when you log in, our whole goal is that we're giving you longer arms and better tools in your hands. So we have a log of what happened. Not only do we see what happened, we have a recording of all the sys log and everything we saw that came across the console port right before it happened. We keep a rolling 2 megabytes of that. We have the previous configuration stored on it. We have the results of whatever monitors, whether it's your monitoring interfaces, you're sending ping tests, you're looking at CPU, all right there to make it easier for you or your customers to troubleshoot. And so that's really the power of this is, I always go back to longer arms and better tools. We allow people to do more And we can also schedule automated maintenance routines. So I'm going to stop here because I just said a whole bunch, and we're going to do one more question, and then we'll move on through the rest of the presentation.
Very good. Here's the last polling question, guys. Now that you just heard what Eric talked about, how long do you or your customers expect it will take to restore your system from outages?
On average, how long, would you say the typical outage is?
Right. Less than an hour, 2 or 3 hours, up to a day, or multiple days? Oh, they're jumping on this one, Eric. We're getting answers very quickly on this last one.
I appreciate this because this is the kind of data that helps me do my job better in, designing products and stuff.
Okay. All right, we're already at 50% of the group, so let's give it another 30 seconds and see if we can't get the other 50. Okay, another about 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's close the poll and now let's share it and see what we got. Okay, interesting. Less than an hour is what they expect. 2 to 3, yeah, 53%. 2 to 3 hours, 35%. Up to a day, 7%, and then multiple days, 5%.
Wow. Yeah, and so I guess it really depends on either where your sites are or who your customers are.
Exactly.
So I'm going to jump back in here. I'm going to go through some stuff, but I'm going to skip. I'm looking at how long I've been talking now. And so I do want to get to the end, and I want to keep us on time, but I do have a bit more to go through. So I'm going to just walk you through some automated routines that we normally ship with that customers do appreciate. One of the things that we've done in a lot of places is people that do push OSs. Sometimes when you push an OS over the wire, things fail and your device is left in a bad state. When we see this happen, for instance, with a Cisco device, if you had to send someone out there, they would go out there and say, oh my gosh, this thing has no OS on it. It's in its ROM on state. What do I need to do to recover it? I got to figure out what version of OS. Where do I find a copy of that? Now I need to find a place to host it, put up a TFTP server. Now I need to figure out what the IP address of this device is. And it's a long, painful process. When I do this manually, it takes a bit of time. When we use the local managers, though, the way that it works at time 0, boom, they see that the router is in the ROM on state. In the first 30 seconds, they've already looked and said, hey, can I find a way to boot this? Does its flash work? Do I find an OS? If it doesn't find an OS, it says, not a problem. I have an OS stored on me, the local manager. Let me see, does it accept X modem? Does it accept TFTP? Does it do SFTP? What commands are available? Once it does that, it sets up, it re-IPs the device, it sets all the appropriate settings that it needs so it can be online and go over using the local network connection that the device has right here. And it will basically re-IP it and then, going in the wrong direction, re-IP it, issue a boot command, and bring it back up. Now, it depends obviously on how big and how long it takes to TFTP it. It's a small device, in 5 minutes, 7 minutes, it's back up and running, probably before you got someone out of bed. Bigger devices, it may take 10 or 15 minutes, but you know what? By the time someone went through all the steps to set everything up, they'd have to wait 10 or 15 minutes because that's what it takes to download the file to it. We also have these service level verification tests, which are very interesting. Besides, as I talked about monitoring the layer 2 stuff, the things that people get really interested in is, can you simulate some network traffic? And we can simulate network traffic to devices out there or between different local managers, Lantronix local managers. If you think about it, the things that we can do are things like we can go to a web page and we can say, hey, how quick does it take from first byte to last byte? Time to connect first byte to last byte. And you can set that up to happen every 5 minutes. And then you can set some thresholds and say, if it goes beyond my threshold of 5 minutes, or if it goes beyond my threshold of whatever I set it, raised by 30%, and I see that 2 or 3 polls in a row, alert me because something's starting to go bad on my network. Similarly, we can go to your mission critical systems, your ERP systems, and reach out to those. We can even make simulated voice calls. And what's nice about that, as I said, before we were sort of doing that passive monitoring, looking at all the statistics coming back from the switch or the router or whatever we were connected into. If we actually make the call, we can call from one local manager to another, and we'll actually speak human sentences, and we can get things back like what's the jitter on that call? What's the latency? What is the mean opinion score? And so we can actually find that there's a problem before end users start reporting it back in, because we'll see the network degrading. The key industries that we serve are, healthcare, financial services, energy, retail, manufacturing, and government. What's interesting is each one of these industries, they all require some sort of automation, they all require some kind of security, but what is their hot buttons is different. If you think about healthcare, they're all about making sure everything's locked down so no one can see patients' records, but it's also, they're usually healthcare systems, you have hospitals spread out throughout a city or a region, and they have their IT sort of centrally located, but they need to be able to reach into stuff, bring stuff up fast. Financial institutions really care about who made what change, when, where, tracking that change, making sure that if anyone did a secure session that they logged out on time. Energy is across the boards, right? Usually it's in hard to reach to places, getting out to an oil rig or driving out to a substation. They also have some really unique equipment. So does government. They have things that they need you to help them manage their encryptors, but you can't see the encryptors. These are things that we have expertise in, and we have expertise in these, and so does our level services guys that can really help you with. Manufacturing and distribution, again, usually there's just no one on the floor there, and a lot of times they fly the racks up in the air, and so it makes it even harder to get to. And same thing with retail, is they have a whole bunch of outlets somewhere. People don't like to lose their point of sale, so they want things that are constantly monitoring their point of sale equipment. I was going to go into some more advanced applications, but I am looking at the time, and it looks like I'm getting to my end, so I'm going to jump through these. I'm just going to skip these last two things to jump up to, give you an overview of 2 of the things. I had talked to you earlier about being able to sense when something loses its configuration. We also have something called OS policies that when you put a new device online, it looks at it and says what version of the OS is it running, and we allow our users to set in the control center for this make and model of device, this is the version of OS we want you to run. If you're not running that version of OS, it can alarm and just tell you, hey, someone just put something on your network that doesn't meet your policies, or it can alarm and tell you that and replace it with the appropriate version. So if you ever have to RMA a device, you don't have to worry about getting the device right and putting it back on your network. You can just have smart hands, plug it in, it'll come on, we'll put the configuration on it, and we'll make sure the right OS is on it. Give you some other ideas of just a real quick, bizarre use cases that people have used over the time, since we can monitor, and more than monitoring, we can take actions. One of our customers, we did a lot of work in gas and oil, was Schlumberger. They had these remote trucks that they would either pull out to oil fields. They'd also pull them into like the Port of Houston when ships would come in to take over comms. And in Houston, they had the problem that there was pretty low bridge on the way out of the port. And people would get back in the truck, they'd cut the power to the back, and they turn on the truck and they drive away. But you see these antennas on top? As soon as they get to that bridge, they hit them and rip them off the top. So they called us and they said, Lantronix, can you help us with this? We said, sure. They said, what we really need you to do is when you see the back of the power get cut, that the truck is turning on, we need you to log into the HTML interface of the satellite antennas and hit the stow button for us. And so now when the driver would jump in, turn on the truck, we would automatically drop the antennas so when they drove out, they wouldn't rip them off. And, it was costing them, north of somewhere around $15,000 every time they hit a bridge. And that's just, an oddball use case, but it can get you to thinking, maybe my customer has a problem that these guys can help. Like I said, we have a great level services team. I would encourage you to talk to our RSMs and FAEs about working with them. And I just wanted to remind you that if you do have cellular and you're interested in cellular connectivities, or you want to look at, out of band management with cellulars, we also have an easy one-stop shop if that makes it easier for you. We are all about making it as easy as possible for our customers and making them as successful as possible. And I apologize, I went 5 minutes over my allotted time. Thank you all very, very much.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Lots of great information. I want to remind everyone that if you do have a question for Eric right now, please use your toolbar and note that question. While you're doing that, I'll also remind those, in case anyone came late, that this is being recorded. We will be sharing this with you, the presentation and the recording, within the next day, so you can review all of this great information that Eric shared with you, as well as share it with colleagues who weren't able to attend today. Also, we have a partner program called Smart Edge. If you're not a member, please don't hesitate to go to the lantronix.com site and join our Smart Edge partner program. We'll have information like this on the portal, as well as other information, case studies, use cases, etc. Okay, gave a little time so people can ask some questions. Let's see what we've got here. Only a couple, Eric. First one is, what's the competitive landscape look like for out-of-band?
Well, the competitive landscape goes from anything from people who have, very inexpensive devices that aren't so reliable, to sort of that mid-tier where, where we have the Lantronix has a lot of products that compete there. And really at that point, you start looking at things like security and reliability, as well as configurability options. When it comes to the automation and the monitoring, there is no device out there. There are devices out there that say you can do this stuff, but they don't have like a button you can push that actually upgrades OSs on routers and switches. You have to use them to log in. There are some devices that are out there where maybe they try to put a hypervisor on there in conjunction with a console server. And that's a really interesting idea, but then they have to run other network, you have to buy other network management applications to run on there. And that becomes a whole security issue of, well, do you really want, people putting software to run against your critical IP stuff that you don't really know what it is? So that's kind of the landscape that I see. I think Lantronix, we have really, really good offerings for both the mid-range and, when you move up into the automated range, I think there's nothing that competes with the advanced out-of-band.
Okay, very good. Okay, and looks like just one more question. Where do you see Lantronix in providing a unique solution? And can you give an example of one or two?
Sure. So we do a lot of stuff that other people don't do, like the fact that we can talk to equipment and we talk to it in its native language. So we know how to talk to routers as if we were network admins. we can talk to satellite gear, satellite modems, KU band stuff. The example that I gave with raising the antenna up and down, there's a lot of stories where people call in and say, here we have this problem that we want to put, that people are handling manually. And really where we shine and that what we do is we say, well, there's no reason to do that manually. We're connected to all these devices. We can look at them, we can make a decision, and we can take action. And even if the network is down, we can take those actions. And we're really the only thing. That's it. We have the patent. No one can log in through a console port and take an action.
Excellent point. All right. Well, again, thank you, Eric, and to all of the attendees, thank you for your attention and your participation. Hold on. We got one more question came in. Hold on. These days, customers are moving to cloud to where exactly Lantronix fits in customer environment or a real use case. So where do we fit in cloud?
Sure. So everything that I said that we do with physical stuff, we can do also with virtual stuff. And you can have a box, and even when you move to a cloud, the cloud means either you're running on either your server or you're running on someone else's server, right? You're running a virtual instance. So we can connect virtually as well as physically. At some point, there's still a box somewhere. So Lantronix, and I should say, Lantronix is more than just out of band. I should actually start it there and say, we are an IoT company and we have a huge suite of products. But when you look at, so where does out of band management come in for cloud devices? There it comes in is where you're trying to manage like the SD-WAN equipment. How do you connect to the virtual console port of a virtual router? And I do this at a number of financial institutions where they have a lot of, in their data centers, or even in their cloud data centers, they have their routers and switches, or well, their routers primarily, and some of their firewalls are all actual virtual instances running on a hypervisor somewhere. But they still have the same management problems that you have. And so if there's a problem on the networking side, you still have to go through that virtual console port of the hypervisor to fix them. And the other part of that too is sometimes you got to bring up those machines that have those hypervisors from afar. And at that point, when you're looking at, one of those servers, you really need some sort of KVM. And that's where our KVM over service processor comes in.
Okay, and we have a follow-up question from the question that was just asked. Can two or more consoles be integrated and report can be seen on a single dashboard?
Yes, so that's what the control center is, and we showed you a picture of just the single dashboard, but you can see everything. I guess I could see if I can launch a web browser right here and see if I can share what the control center looks like if you would like, but you can see all the devices, and that's where you can say, I want to, whoops, excuse me, I want to look at, all the switches or all the routers or that meet a. See if I can get this real quick. I want to look at all the switches, all the routers that were changed yesterday and see the changes. So you're consolidating and aggregating the data from all your devices. Oops.
Okay, I only can give you another 30 more seconds if you can find it. If not, we can certainly have an FAE show you this, but it is definitely doable.
Yes, it is. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to type on not my computer. I am in a conference room at the office. trying to remember the URLs to get to here. I was not really thinking I'd be going live, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you guys go, and I'm gonna go with that. Let's get back to
Okay. One more quick last question. This one is, why does Lantronix not offer lifetime warranties, whereas others do?
We offer more features than some of the other devices. You know, if you have a lifetime warranty on a device that does absolutely nothing, or if your device needs a lifetime warranty because it's not that solid, it would be my guess. We are more than, you know, I won't bash on any of our competitors, but you know, our devices tend to run for 10 plus years, and our biggest problem is getting people up to speed.
Okay, one last quick one. One question has begotten another question. Does console raise an alert in case of unauthorized access?
It does, but it's even harder to get. It's not even unauthorized access. What we'll do with the local managers and with the local managers is we will actually report the IP addresses of every unsuccessful login. So if you're getting attacked, you know, and you can see at what times of day different countries have their hackers if you just put things out on the network. Now, if somebody can get in through your multi-factor authentication, we're not going to know that it's unauthorized, if that makes sense. We do have some other modes that we can run in where you can lock the boxes down harder, and if it thinks someone is trying to tamper with the box, it can actually totally lock it down and brick it, which is what some of the governments need to do. But that's a much longer discussion. I would say please reach out to your RSM and FAE to get a demo of that. And remember, everything that anyone types in every session is recorded and is you can go back and look at it. So you have a complete audit log.
Another question here. Again, we're running over, so I'm just going to do one more question, but this one looked very interesting. How is Cisco associated to Lantronix in out of band?
That's a great question. So Cisco is one of our we are a development partner for Cisco. In some ways, we do some of our most of our work with Cisco, or some of our coolest features for Cisco. So both, you know, for the EMGs, the SLCs, and the local managers, we are development partners, and in some cases, Cisco actually is a customer of ours.
All right, we are way over, and we do want to be respectful of everyone's time. If we haven't answered your question, we will answer it independently after the meeting to your direct email address. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending, and Eric, thank you for a very informative webinar. Good day, all.
Good day.